All right, it's time for the media show. One of the discussions in the media show has actually been involving North Carolina and the North Carolina coach, who used to be the New England Patriots coach. And some people are wondering how much impact this young lady that he is dating is having on his media appearance and all along those lines. So that is definitely one of the media conversations that a lot of people are talking about and that they're finding interesting and engaging. So Bill Belichick, that used to be the coach for the New England Patriots for a number of years and everything along those lines. He is now the coach at UNC. And definitely there are folks that are talking about Jordan Hudson, who is his lady love, at least the lady that he's dated, and all along those lines. And they're trying to figure out what's going on in that space. And there is definitely a lot of talk in social media about their age difference, but also her impact on his coaching, because apparently all emails have to be uh, co-signed or at least sent to her as well. So there's some questions as to how much control she has on his whole coaching abilities. And apparently, in a scrimmage, she came out in a very lovely outfit and all along those lines. And then recently, she was on 60 Minutes and when it got to the whole question of her role in the whole situation and to how they met. There is a big age gap and everything like that. She basically shut down the CBS interviewer and all in that space and said that that was not a subject that they would be talking about and all along those lines. So definitely there's been a lot of social media conversation about that. Some people are calling her a gold digger. Some people are saying that they could be truly in love even with their age difference and everything like that. And some people are saying that he wants to show that he is still got it in terms of being able to get young, attractive women even at his age, because I think that he's close to 70, and of course she's in her 20s and all along those lines. So that is one of the conversations that has been impacting the media quite a bit and all along those lines, and that's right here in North Carolina. I'm gonna see what Kim's got going on and what she's been hearing about this whole conversation and things of that nature, and we'll see if anybody else is going to jump into our media show. But that was something that I did see was a major conversation that was going on in the world, particularly since Bill Belichick had been interviewed yesterday on CBS, and a lot of people were talking about that video and heard basically just yelling out across the interview that they would not be discussing that and all along those lines. So there are some things that are private and some people want to keep private, and that is definitely something that is a media topic. So I'm gonna bring in Kim Calhoun and see what your thoughts are on this topic. But I was saying that one of the big things that I saw in media was this whole notion of Bill Belichick, who used to be the coach of the New England Patriots, and apparently he's got this young lady that he is dating. They've been together now for a while. I think about a year or two. There is definitely a massive age gap difference and everything like that. But apparently she's also got some control, because I think that some of the emails are supposed to go through her or they're supposed to be CC to her, so that I guess she can help him decide what is the most order of priority. And then yesterday there was this interview with CBS where when they got to the topic of how they met, she just basically shut down the interviewer and said they would not be discussing that whatsoever and all along those lines. So I just wondered, as a woman, your take on these age gap difference relationships. There are a number of those that are in Hollywood and everything, and also just sometimes people spend too much time on things that are not necessarily any of their business. As long as they are happy together, who cares if there's a 40 or 50-year gap? Is a lot of people's attitudes, but I don't know what your attitude is. But definitely, there's a lot of folks, and there's a lot of social media blowing up. People calling her all kinds of names, including one that rhymes with witch and another one that rhymes with camp and everything like that. So there's a lot of people that were trying to call her names, besides the fact that apparently she is uh, standing by her man. At least that's everything I've saw. That we can go by the old country song and everything like that. So if she wants to stand by her man, even if there is a 45 or 60-year gap, I think it's a 45-year gap or something like that. But definitely that was something that I did see in media news that was big yesterday, and it's all over social media, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's a number of other places.
So first, why are people shaming her
Right.
when he should be the adult in this situation by now? He should that many years. If there's a situation, right? If it is a bad thing, we don't know. We don't know what kind of compassion and passion they share. Maybe it's something good for both of them.
Right.
Hopefully neither one of them hurt anyone in their immediate lives in this relationship pact. But who's to judge what makes someone happy? Look at Cher, okay? Cher's dating someone, 30, 40 years younger than her. It's a great relationship. They've been together a long time. It's her energy, right? And he probably thrives on her energy, and she's probably thriving on his wisdom and stableness and stability. We see this all the time happening, but the problem I have is all of the women who would dare and have the audacity to call her names and shame her, as opposed to going, what's his problem? Why are they shaming her? Because, certainly the lure is in the adult more than it is in the child. I don't think she's a child. I don't know how old she is versus his age, but
she's in her early 20s. She's in her early 20s, and there's been some speculation as to when they actually met, because I think she was a cheerleader. So there are some people that are trying to push the pedophile narrative as well. But we know we've got some people even in leadership that same conversation could be had. So I guess people are trying to figure out if they met when she was.
What about all of the people who hung out with Epstein and had sex with minors? Okay, so let's open up the Epstein files and shame those men in those files, but let's stop shaming a female for dating a successful, sophisticated man. Maybe who knows, but apparently there's something there, otherwise he still wouldn't be with her. And who knows, they might last his lifetime or hers. But I don't think it's anyone's business, and I think jealousy and envy gets in the way. And I think that people, especially women, need to stop shaming the women first, especially the gang shaming, where it's almost like one little piece of blood is drawn and they all come in like a frenzy, almost like, I call it cockroaches out of the wall, but it could be piranhas, or sharks, and they just gang shame. And it's got to stop, because good for her if she found someone she's in love with that is in love back with her. Good for both of them. Good, and if they did hurt someone in this journey and in this course, I think it needs to change. I got to get this. Can you take over?
Yeah, I can do that. But yeah, definitely there's a lot of that going on, and people are wondering about the nature of the situation and all along those lines. And definitely there are even people that are trying to make comparisons between her and Anna Nicole Smith and everything. So there are people that are thinking that it is a gold digging effort. And I would agree with you that we don't know the motives, we don't know the reasoning, and we don't need to be trying to speculate and all on those lines. Hopefully it is a love relationship, and hopefully they are actually in love. But there are people that are trying to do, as you just said, that name shaming and that whole shaming of the person and trying to call them names, whether it is the names that I hinted at by the rhyming words, one that rhymes with camp and one that rhymes with witch and everything, and definitely calling the other person a gold digger and all along those lines. And I mean, there's a number of others that are in that same space that probably could be called that in a lot more effective and efficient way, and it would probably be more truthful and everything like that. But people are making speculations and they don't know the person. I don't know the person, never met either one of the individuals, so I'm not going to try to sit there and make a judgment on folks, not knowing what their whole life story is and what they are about or how they met. And like you said, it could have been a love that is a love supreme, if I can borrow that song from a line from an old song and everything like that. So they may actually find out that they are truly in love and will be in love with each other for a number of years. Much longer he's got, and we don't know how much longer she's got. Sometimes people can even surprise us, because as a friend of mine says, none of us know we know our birthday, but none of us know the end date. And it's a matter of what you do with that dash in between and everything like that. So definitely trying to make these whole notions of what it could be and all in that space. So that's something that folks have been talking about in the news. Apparently, in a few days, President Trump will be kicking off a media blitz this week, so this ought to be interesting to mark the first 100 days of his second term in the White House. And I know on the other shows we were talking about how he's trying to recover from his not doing that well in the polls, and I think he's going after some of the posters, but he's expected to take a victory lap with a speech on Tuesday in Michigan. So I guess he's going to tell us what's going well in his campaign, and well, not campaign, but in his first 100 days, and how this is going compared to his last term. But definitely, he's saying that this will be this whole media blitz where he'll be going around talking about what's been done in these first 100 days. So I think that Tuesday must be that 100-day mark if he is doing it on that particular day. But I did know he was coming up on 100 days and everything like that. So he's going to tell us what has been accomplished, what needs to be accomplished, and what else he sees in that whole notion and all along those lines. So I know that Kim was on a call. Hopefully she'll join me shortly, and she might have some ideas about that. I know we had a lot of people that are thinking he really hadn't done much in that space and everything like that. And apparently, speaking of Trump, his press secretary argued earlier today that trust in mainstream media outlets has taken a major hit in recent years, partly because of the news coverage of former President Biden. So she's claiming that the media coverage of Biden caused a decline in the trust with the media and all in that space. And part of that is what I know even Shaquille has talked about and others have talked about, which is this notion that he was a person that was sick and that he wasn't necessarily covered the way that it should have been. So she argued that the trust in mainstream media outlets has taken a major hit in recent years, partly because of news coverage of former President Biden's final days in office and his exit from the 2024 presidential race over concerns about his mental acuity. So millions of Americans watch our mentally incompetent president struggle with his day-to-day duties of this office. We watch our country be ran into the ground as a result, and nobody in the media wanted to write about that, Levitt told reporters. And I remember being on President Trump's campaign talking about Joe Biden's clear mental incompetence and being accused by people in this room of manufacturing deep-faking videos, trying to persuade the public into not believe in what they saw with their own eyes for many years. So this remark came in response to a question from the conservative outlet Daily Signal about comments made by Axios journalist Alex Thompson criticizing news outlets over their coverage of Biden. Being truth tellers also means telling the truth about ourselves. We, myself included, miss a lot of this story, Thompson said while speaking at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. President Biden's decline and his cover-up by the people around him is a reminder that every White House, regardless of party, is capable of deception. Levitt on Monday agreed with Thompson's assessment, but she sought to cast blame specifically on news media outlets rather than Biden's White House. I think it's about time the legacy media finally admits that this was one of the greatest cover-ups and scandals that ever took place in American history, Levitt said, and certainly it did contribute to the decline in the trust that Americans have for the legacy media, which, by the way, is why we made many changes to this briefing room in this White House. So definitely they're saying there's questions about Biden's age and mental state grew more intense last year. His White House dismissed him and accused conservative media outlets of playing up his gaffes and other public speaking miscues. So the Wall Street Journal published an extensive story raising concerns about Biden's age and mental state in June, which was ridiculed by top White House aides at the time and sparked accusations of bias against his administration. And after he stumbled during the debate with President Trump, later that month, the tone of coverage of his campaign shifted and inspired the New York Times editorial board, stop celebrities and others to call for him to drop out. So definitely, but I've heard other people say that they've seen some gaffes in the Trump administration as well, but nobody's calling for him to step down. But I definitely heard some people that have said that they've seen some speaking gaffes, some fallen gaffes, and other gaffes. So it's interesting that his press secretary is making these accusations when I've definitely heard people say that, yes, he might be able to do many rounds of golf, but that he's had some missteps as well. So I just wanted your take on this notion of media bias, because definitely the media can be biased. There's one in the media. I noticed that's something that we try to steer away from and try to not have, and we do a good job of it, I think, here on this network of trying to be as unbiased as possible. But I just wonder your take, because I do agree that truth tellers also have to tell the truth about themselves, and definitely if there were things that were missed, and there were definitely things missed in the Biden administration, that we got to acknowledge those, but I think that there can also be said to be some things that are not being reported about this administration too. But I just wanted your take on that.
Well, I mean, I don't know what all media hid in the Biden administration. I think that perhaps his people surrounded him, and I'm not going to say hid anything as much as just held him up and had his back.
Right.
But when it comes to media hiding things, I've personally witnessed where, they asked, Sean Hannity asked Trump 3 times the same question on set. And, it was supposed to be, 30, 40-minute interview kind of thing, ended up being forever. And, Trump, just focus on the question and answer. All right. They cut all of that. They cut all of that out. Editing, yeah, both sides. I think they edit a lot on both sides when they get a chance. There, in most TV industry, there is like what we call a half a breath or a second, where between where we could cut something real quick if you've got people real observant and watching before it hits the viewer's broadcast, right? Where they could stop something in case they're like, oh my God, that girl flashed her boob in front of the world, like, what happened at the Super Bowl. So, they didn't catch that. I think they were too stunned, but there is a gap, not a big one, because it's about being as reality TV as you can, or real. But I think both sides edit where they can. I don't like editing. So what we do is what you see is what you get. Nick doesn't like editing. I mean, edit looks good, right?
Yeah.
Feels good. But what I've learned from reality is we've saved, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year not doing editing. And people get what they see. I mean, we are it. We are real stories, real people, real mistakes in front of you, fixing our problems sometimes on the screen in front of you. But, and I shared this morning. Years ago, Nick and I were negotiating or talking with CBS. We were with PBS doing some shows, and it was very expensive. But Nick and I decided we didn't like walking the way they wanted us to walk or talking the way they wanted us to talk. And, we just didn't like all of the implications that goes with it. And it would cost $1,000 a minute to do an interview. And that was before editing. So if you just went live at $1,000 a minute, that's not bad. But if you're on location, you're going to have to do a lot of editing. So it was expensive. So Nick and I decided, hey, you know what? We got to come up with another idea or quit this business. And Nick and we would be doing GoToMeetings back then, which is like Zoom.
Right.
And came up with the idea, Nick goes, I've got an idea if the technology can do it, and so, we use Zoom and we invite people to interview with us. Now, this was way before COVID, before the Super Bowl in 2019, we were doing what you call like the Zoom or the virtual podcast. And they were good. They weren't great. Technology hadn't caught up really good, but we were doing it. And we were able to either go on location, interview somebody there, and we had the little Brady Bunch cubes, or we were able to do it virtual. And we saved thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, what happened was, people would laugh and say, oh, that's stupid. That's a stupid idea. It'll never go anywhere. And then when COVID hit, guess what everybody started doing? So in reality, I think Nick and we could probably go back and pull up some of the first ones we ever did. But in reality, Nick, actually, I'm going to give him most of the credit, came up with this virtual reality podcasting, Zoom, GoToMeeting type view. And then things started growing and technology caught up to where we can make some really good shows. Nick, welcome back. Are you okay?
Nick's back.
Do you guys pick up on the news? What happened over here?
Yeah, there was a major power outage. We were talking about it.
Well, in case you don't know, everything went down. I'm still doing damage control. Apparently, at 12:40 today, our time, which is about 4 or 5 hours ago, the internet. I was on the internet, of course, because I live there. The internet went down. Everything went down. And so I thought it was we blew a fuse, because usually that's what happens.
That's what I told folks. I even told David Walker, because I brought in David Walker and told him that I was in the middle of the storm.
That's part of my damage control. I was wondering if the show went on, because when the internet went down here and the power grid, the whole power grid in Spain went down. It wasn't just my house. It wasn't my neighborhood. It was the whole country went down. Wow. In Spain, Portugal, and southern France. Just completely. Wow. Okay. Now here's the problem. That means I can't make phone calls, believe it or not, because everything's on the internet. I can't text you guys. I can't say, hey, I'm not going to be on work. We have a problem coming up because the internet's not working. I could do nothing. And I'm trying to figure out why I could write you a letter. That's what they did in the 1800s. And you'd get it like 3 or 4 weeks from now. You'd say, oh, Mark, can you do the show in about an hour because my internet's down.
No, I figured as much. I was studying the news, and I figured your internet had gone down, so I was doing damage control things because I even jumped into the show.
You did a great job until I could jump in. I didn't have internet access until I was able to jump in because I forgot to ask the people for the internet access.
Yeah, I did see Mark was able to start the show with David Walker, but I was going to see he couldn't even call me. I mean, it was kind of like this whole place went dead cold. In other words, like if David had a problem, he goes, oh, I'll call Nick. No, because the phones weren't working.
And he used to call me, but he didn't call me. So
well Mark saved it. It looks like he was on in time, or
he was on. He did a good show.
And the joys of virtual TV.
Mark was able to do the show, but I couldn't text you. I couldn't send anything through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. There was just no communications. All the communications here went dead. The thing is, and it went dead for many hours. The funny thing is some people have backup systems, so they backed up the street lights.
They have like a generator or something like that.
Maybe the hospitals did, but I'm not sure if the internet had a backup system. In other words, even though if I had a generator. So this was kind of it's only happened once before in Spain since I've been here, where the internet went off, but it was only off for like a half hour or something like this. It was off for like 4 hours. I'm not sure
what's causing it. Just a glitch.
I believe, without knowing, it was a cyber attack from Russia.
They said it was cyber from Russia.
Yeah. Is that what they said?
That's
okay. I just got back on.
I mean, rumor. When I saw that, I was Googling.
I'm just catching up, so I have no idea. I'm still doing damage control, so I have no idea what happened. But my belief is just because it took so long to get back on, and here's the Russian way of thinking. By the way, we have Russian friends around here, that they don't know what their government's doing. And it could be some group that is with the government. But here's my thinking, my calculus without knowing. So Russia doesn't like Europe. Okay, we kind of got that. And they don't like anybody except Russia. We got that. And they look for, okay, let's see how we can create havoc. Well, they go to Germany, and there's Germans. Everything's got to be by the book, and we have redundant systems, blah, 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 blah. And so Germany is not a good place to go to. This is my analysis. We go to France. Oh, France is defending themselves because they're afraid of the Germans. Okay. They go to England. We can't get to England because they have redundant systems. Then they look at Spain and Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe goes, we understand Russia. We're going to create systems to stop Russia. In other words, all of the Eastern Bloc, and I'm talking about Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they understand that the Russians are jerks. So they design systems. But now we come to Spain and Portugal. These people are, laid back as you can possibly get. In other words, they're all on vacation 24/7, which makes it a good place to live if you want to go on vacation. So they probably didn't create systems, antibodies for the Russians so the Russians targeted Spain and Portugal. That's just my guess, without reading the news or finding out. I'm sure they're going to find out shortly, but I believe this was a cyber attack, and it pulled down my portion of Pod TV. Your guys all could work, but I went out the door, and it makes it really difficult to even communicate. In other words, like, oh, I'll call you. No, everything's on the internet.
Yeah, it'd be nice if it was communicating.
system, but I guess it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. But speaking of communicating, and this was an interesting conversation I had with some friends yesterday, and I mentioned it to Kim and all on those lines. But there are some folks that are using it live streaming, and they're using it in a interesting way. They're using it as part of the protest movement and everything like that. Because I know that yesterday he did a speech on, I think it was in Washington, and I think he's doing one right about now and everything. But Reverend Barber, who does the Breach Repairers, I think is the name of his organization, but he was doing a live feed. They probably had some professional live stream cameras out there, and they were actually doing it as a protest against the administration. Some friends of mine were asking me, well, how's he doing that? And when I typed on it, I saw that part of the live feed was being embedded into a Substack. So he was actually having it so that you clicked on it, it would go live to that performance. And like I said, it was done yesterday afternoon. I think he was on for about an hour and a half, ranting and raving against the Trump administration and everything. And I think that they were doing one later on this afternoon as well, but they were doing it live, much in the way that David Walker did. And I know that they have the professional equipment in the Capitol as well. So when he spoke, there was definitely some professional cameras there and everything. So these folks are hiring professional cameras that are a little bit more on the expensive side, but they're professional live stream cameras where they're able to do live stream events. But as I was telling them, and my friend Ray, who does some events as well, was telling some folks who were asking me about it because they wanted to try to do it for some of their events. It's not a cheap proposition. And I know that the two of you know that it's not a cheap proposition either, because you have to get these kind of specialized cameras that are able to go and the performances and everything. And they're also not always synced, because one of the events that I went to this weekend was Biscuit and Banjos, which was a look at Black music and its importance to country and folk music, that was done by Rihanna Giddens, who now lives in Ireland, and I hope to get her on this network in the not too distant future and everything like that. She's living there with her second husband, because both husbands are of Irish descent and everything like that. But I was in the DPAC, which is, is a popular Durham venue, and watching her performance, but I was in the not the worst seats, but they were definitely in the upper part of the theater. So I was watching her perform down in the lower level, but I was also watching the two screens, but the screens weren't always in sync. So sometimes you'd hear the song and be like, I hear what's going down there, and that's not matching that. So they're not always in sync and everything like that. So that can be another interesting problem that could take place.
Oh, yeah. And for our viewers who don't know what the DPAC is, because everybody here knows, but they don't. It's the Durham Performing Arts Center. It's a great theater in Durham. And Mark, my belief is there are no bad seats, because I've sat at the nosebleed, I've sat at the bottom, and all the seats are good.
Yes.
And it's really this is comparable. I'm serious. This is comparable or better than Broadway theaters. So it's definitely not a bad theater at all. So
it was a good venue, and like I said,
theater. Steve Martin and Martin Short are coming this year to I think DPAC, and I think it's DPAC. I would give anything to go, but the tickets they're starting at $300.
Okay, I'm going to give you something that just happened here in Spain. I know people don't follow Spain, but here's what happened. I have some news. FC Barcelona, which is my team right here, CFC Barcelona.
Oh, yeah.
Played Real Madrid for a country championship of some sort. So it shows how much you know about soccer, right? Okay, in Seville, they didn't play in Barcelona. They didn't play Madrid. Oh, we're up all night because the people here were screaming. It went to overtime, 3-2. I was asleep, but the whole city was up watching it because they had to come from behind, tie the game, and then they won. They beat Real Madrid in overtime. But that's not the exciting thing. Here's the exciting thing. The tickets were $460. Oh, yeah. Excuse me, that was the lowest ticket. The average ticket to go see that game was 1,433 euros, which translates to about $1,600. So you take your significant other, you go to watch the game for a couple hours. It will cost you just tickets alone, not traffic, not anything else, $3,200. And you know what? They packed the stadium. 72,000 people. They packed it for $1,400 a ticket. Okay, and I'm going, most of the people, and I'll give you another stat. The average person in Spain makes 10,000 euros a year. So you're going to spend 15% of your income
Well,
to go watch the game. Well,
DPAC
obviously not the average person went to see the game, but I'm just going 15% of your income for 2 hours. I mean, it's just going like, are you kidding me?
Nick and Kim, that actually brings in an interesting point because more people are doing this, and even in the live stream space and everything like that. Because I mentioned the Biscuit and Banjos was a 2.5, almost 3-day festival. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and like I said, there was a lot of great artists, including Taj Mahal and Infinity Soul, which I think is out of New York and is recently signed to might have been trying to think, it's one of the major rap and R&B labels and everything. I don't think it's Jay-Z's label, but it's one of the other labels. But they just recently signed to that. But like you said, the DPAC seats about 2,800, I think, and all along those lines. So it's a very unique idea, and it was pretty much sold out and everything. But what they did, which I think more and more people are going to be doing, is if you want to spend, then I had comp tickets, which is a wonderful thing because of the organization that I work with and everything like that. But if you want to spend, if you didn't want to spend the cost of going to the theater and everything, they live streamed it to one of the other theaters that was outside. So you could actually see the show for free outside. So there was the people that paid to go to the show inside, and then there was probably a decent population of folks that were in outside watching it in the outside arena. And I know that they've been doing that, I think, with some of the sports competitions. I know that they've done it even with some soccer matches and others. So I think that this is a new trend that we're going to see where people will be doing a blend of live streaming and the concert itself and everything like that. So that is something that they did on that particular one. Because, I mean, this was a group that was popular back in the day, and this was their reunion concert. So the Carolina Chocolate Drops. They've gone on to different lives. Justin Robinson is very much involved in gardening and stuff like that. And Don Flemings is very much involved in playing with like the jug, basically. So like playing the jug like you would drink in the old moonshine days and everything like that. But he knows how to play it as a musical instrument along with some other specialty instruments and everything like that. And then, like I said, Rihanna has got her own podcast and is in Ireland and is very much involved in the whole folk and bluegrass music scene and all along those lines. So this was a reunion of the three of them together, probably about a decade or so and everything like that. So if you didn't want to see the reunion inside, you could actually watch the reunion outside as well. So that was something that was going on. That was a different situation. Christian McBride, who's a known jazz artist, who was there as well. So it was definitely a well-attended event, and a lot of people were there enjoying themselves, and definitely it was a buzz around downtown Durham, North Carolina, and everything like that. So it was exciting to be part of that. I took some pictures that I know Kim saw, and I probably need to put some of them on TikTok, but I did have some of them on my own Facebook, and it was just some of the clips, just a little short 10-minute to 15, 20-second clips of maybe a minute at the most of some of the music, so you could get a taste of what was going on. Hey, Kim.
Speaking of music, I'm actually going to the LeCou on May the 10th. And of course, no one knows what that is because you're in the United States. It is and has been the largest theater in the world from 1847 to 1889 in Barcelona, Spain. Now think about it, the largest theater in the world in the 1800s. So why am I going to this LeCou, which frankly I never heard of until we got the tickets, to watch the London Symphony Orchestra? They're actually playing here in Barcelona on May the 10th. So I acquired a couple tickets to go watch them. And so then I wanted to go see where the theater was and learn a little bit about it. And then I noticed that from it started around 1847. I think from maybe 1867 to 1889, it seats about 3,000 people. It was the largest theater in the world. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's actually a tourist trap in and of itself near the Goddard Center. So, they have some very fascinating things that if you're in the United States, you just don't even know about it. I mean, I lived here and I didn't know about it until I got the tickets. Who would know they had the largest theater in the world in the 1800s in Barcelona? Mm-hmm. So there's some interesting things. And the grid going down, that's interesting. Yeah, after I'm done, I'm going to find out basically what happened and see if there's any way I can stop it. Maybe buying a generator would get me back on the, give me back juice, but I don't know if I could get back on the internet. So this is the cyber things can be very serious, and we just have to let people know that.
Well,
Okay,
speaking of very serious, we've got to get our Spanish girls on because they would compete with this other story that I'm going to mention, because apparently a woman has left Spotify because she's going to launch something called Damsel Media. So Liz Gately created series, including MTV's Laguna Beach, is launching her own production company, and she's left Spotify to launch Damsel Media. The company will specialize in programming for Gen Z women, and definitely this is apparently a fitting move for the executive that behind some series that were geared towards the teens. So since we've got our own young ladies, the 20-year-olds that are over there in Florida, maybe we'll have to see if they can get their show launched so they can compete against Liz, who is doing
we have those two Spanish ladies who are looking to. There's some interesting thing about Spotify. There's another thing in Spain. They're big into soccer, or what they call football. It's at $1,400 a ticket that competes with Super Bowl tickets, I think. Maybe not, but it's pretty hefty. Spotify threw their name on the Barcelona stadium. It's called Spotify Camp Nou, believe it or not. I don't know how much they paid for that. But my question is, since I've never used Spotify, what is it, Mark?
Spotify is basically like a way you can get your music and stuff along those lines. So a lot of people will have their favorite music on Spotify and everything like that. So it is another social media tool.
Audio versus video.
Okay,
and it's like Pod TV. They're a huge distributor access, right? Huge broadcasting access for people to do their music, their podcast, sport events. I mean, you name it. But Spotify is that thing that people go to, kind of like YouTube, but it's audio only.
It's audio only. Okay. Yeah. And we're also broadcasting now through TikTok occasionally. I still have to learn how to broadcast some of these things through TikTok. My question, though, to you guys is, how long are we going to be able to do this? As the Donald tends to get in a fight with everybody he can find, and fight with China may not be good. And TikTok is still owned by ByteDance. Are we going to be, and we're getting a lot of good responses on TikTok, is this going to be a short-term relationship where we're on TikTok, we get a lot of views, and all of a sudden TikTok just goes off the air in the US, which is quite possible. You know, you have to give it a probability of probably greater than, I would say at least 10% probability, maybe 25% probability that TikTok won't be around, at least in this form and fashion, in the next 6 to 8 months. And this is one problem that all media companies have. You devote a lot of time to building around a network and they destroy you. YouTube and Facebook were notorious for that. And to give you an idea how bad they are, the European Union, I'm just giving some more reports from Union, fined Facebook and Google, who owns YouTube, $800 million for antitrust violations. Okay, which doesn't surprise me at all, because the minute you go on either one, they say, sign up through Google, sign up through Facebook. They're all in bed together. In other words, it's almost like they even made David Walker mad, because on some of the things they gave him through StreamYard, they want him to route everything through Facebook. You don't want to be routed through Facebook.
They don't want to be routed through Facebook.
Well, you know how to fix that now, right? You know that when you build the link for StreamYard, you go in and you say, send it without doing that. There's a way to do it.
Well, you can do that. Okay. Well, I must have corrected it somehow so that.
Well, I kind of did by going in and doing a master, but sometimes even if you do a master, it still goes in and does it its own way.
Well, when is StreamYard going to hook up to TikTok, or are they ever going to do it? Because they may do the same thing.
Well, I mean, they haven't really hooked up with Instagram. Instagram is done it's done through the RTMP, and it's there, but it's hard to get through and everything like that. So it's there, but it's not the.
So speaking of hard and getting there, one video that has got a lot of attention. Remember, we interviewed on Lawyer's Den the guy that filed the suit for the antitrust case at the U.S. International Trade, saying that basically Trump doesn't have the right to do these tariffs. Okay, that got like tons of views. I mean, it was like people were eating that up. And not only that, since we aired that, there's like more than a dozen states. When we aired it, there were 3 states plus. Actually, when I talked to the guy who's the only one who filed the suit, the U.S. International Court of Trade. And then it's expanded to federal district courts and expanded. Now there's 12 of them around. And it poses, I think, a very interesting question the Supreme Court's having to deal with. Is this a legislative or an executive function to set tariffs in the world? In other words, in the United States, excuse me.
I don't think it should be left to the president. I will say that. Given the fact that we have a legislative branch and we have Congress, I don't think that should have been a president's choice because it impacts too many people's lives. Like, yeah. I don't think he took into consideration all of the farmers that are now can't do farming because they can't buy the materials they need from China and Korea or wherever they were buying them from because it's too expensive. The one farmer was showing, he goes, last year I was paying 2 cents a pole. This year I'm paying $2 a pole. Mm-hmm. No, you ain't getting your vegetables this year. Yeah. Right. And he didn't have a small farm. This is a guy who had machinery after machinery. And he said that everything that Trump did just cut his farm short because he doesn't have the employees he needs and Americans can't do it.
Well, yeah. And here's the logic behind it. The legislative branch, which sits behind me, their mission is to create the laws. The executive branch, which you don't see here, theirs are to execute the laws that the legislative branch creates, not the other way around, or not right. The executive branch gets to create the law and execute the law. So this is good.
And also, I thought it was Congress that was supposed to do things about our financial situation. I thought things had to go through Congress.
Yeah,
what happened to that?
It does say that. It actually does say that they're in charge of the tax and spending. Tariffs are a tax. So, like I said, this poses a very interesting constitutional question. I have no doubt you're going to see this get in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. The only question isn't if, it's when it's going to get in front of the Supreme Court, because they almost have to take cases on what they call conflict jurisdiction, which means one court, lower court rules, yeah, you can do it. No one says, no, you can't. Bingo, it'll be in front of the Supreme Court. Another great case, and they're trying to dismiss it, is this Alberto Garcia case. It's almost like they're ignoring it. You can't ignore this. Now, this is something good. I'm going to give a plug to the University of Miami. First of all, Cam Ward at the football team was the #1 draft pick in the NFL from the University of Miami. He got $48 million. Shadue Sanders, who went to Colorado, got $4 million.
Yeah, Deion.
Got $4 million. Cam Ward made a lot more. So hats off to the University of Miami. Hats off again to the University of Miami for Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio actually took a position against the Trump administration, saying, yes, you need due process law. Now, remember, Marco Rubio went to the University of Miami Law School, which I went to law school and learned the same thing I did. There's due process when it comes to immigration. J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School and said, no, there's no due process. So they're going, is that what you Yaleys learn when you go to Yale Law School? I mean, the Yaleys are out of control. The thing is, I'm not impressed with what they graduated out of that school. My Lord, it's important.
Neither here nor there. I don't think it's the president who should be able to go in and dictate what they learn and don't learn. I think that overall there should be a global panel, just kind of like the coolest thing that this guy did at NC State was he put together a board of advisors who would congregate every once in a while, and we would evaluate what the students were learning. We would get to talk with them. But we were professionals from our field, and we would say, hey, we really think they need to be learning this instead of this. Why aren't you teaching them this? And I think that there needs to be a global group of people who do that and hand it down to the universities. Now, whether the universities do it or not, it's a different story. But, all too often, the universities were running into that wall of our students aren't getting hired. Well, why not? Well, you're not teaching them what they need to work with in the real world. And one of the biggest problems was engineering, because by the time the students learned something in 4 years, long left them when they graduated, right? Like our computers change on a daily basis. So I think, the president doesn't need to be going in going, I'm the goddamn president. You're going to do what I say and teach what I say. And, I hope Harvard rips his butt up.
He does have a lawsuit against Harvard, too.
Yeah, he does have the Harvard thing going
and
on.
I think that, he didn't just deport Garcia. There are a handful of other people that I've talked to, women. Their husbands have been sent, and there was no reason to send them. Here's the other question that's going on around now, because usually it takes a while until you realize that there's a problem. Is the women that they're picking up, no one has any means to find out where they went. Now, the men, usually you could track it to one deportation center, where if you're lucky, you can say goodbye to them by phone before they send them across whatever border or, to El Salvador hell camp. But the women, they can't find them. They have no idea. ICE picked them up and they're gone. The women cannot be found anywhere. And so people now are crying out, where are the women? And they have been deporting children. They've been grabbing 11-year-old girls, and they're missing too.
Yeah, and the other
all of this, my mind, Nick, goes back to the Epstein files that still hasn't been opened. And I think they're building their own breeding ground for whatever it is they want to do. Because I think when we open up the Epstein files, we're going to see all the psychopaths that are in our administration. And you know what? No one should be so high up and have a position held so high that they are hidden.
Speaking of that, Kim, and I'm not going to read the whole thing.
For their sins like this. That should be open. But that's disturbing me, is nobody can find where the women are going.
Speaking of disturbing you on those lines and everything, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it takes the whole 10 minutes we got left, but I'm going to read part of it. This was sent to me by a friend in Facebook. She didn't even enter the U.S. She was just applying for entry, and all this happened. American Pie actress Jasmine Mooney, a Canadian, was detained by Trump's ICE agents at the U.S.-Mexico border and jailed for 20 days. Jasmine Mooney. There was no explanation, no warning. 1 minute, I was in an immigration office talking to an officer about my work visa, which had been approved months before and allowed me, a Canadian, to work in the U.S. The next, I was told to put my hands against the wall and patted down like a criminal before being sent to an ICE detention center without the chance to talk to a lawyer. I grew up in Whitehorse, Yukon, a small town in the northernmost part of Canada. I always knew I wanted to do something bigger with my life. I left home early and moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I built a career spanning multiple industries, acting in film and television, owning bars and restaurants, flipping condos, and managing Airbnbs. In my 30s, I found my true passion working in the health and wellness industry. I was given the opportunity to help launch an American brand of health tonics called Holy Water, a job that would involve moving to the U.S. I was granted my trade and NAFTA work visa, which allows Canadians and Mexican citizens to work in the U.S. in specific professional occupations. On my second attempt, it goes without saying then that I have no criminal record. I also love the U.S. and consider myself to be a kind, hardworking person. I started working in California and traveled back and forth between Canada and the U.S. multiple times without any complications until one day, upon returning to the U.S., a border officer questioned me about my initial visa denial and subsequent visa approval. He asked why I had gone to the San Diego border the second time to apply. I explained that was where my lawyer's office was and that he had wanted to accompany me to ensure there was no issues. After a long interrogation, the officer told me it seemed shady and that my visa hadn't been properly processed. He claimed I also couldn't work for a company in the U.S. that made use of hemp, one of the beverage ingredients. He revoked my visa and told me I could still work for the company from Canada, but if I wanted to return to the U.S., I would need to reapply. I was devastated. I just started building a life in California. I stayed in Canada for the next few months and was eventually offered a similar position with a different health and wellness brand. I restarted the visa process and returned to the same immigration office at the San Diego border since they had processed my visa before and I was familiar with it. I was passed with many confused opinions about my case. The officer I spoke to was kind, but told me that due to the previous issue, I needed to apply for my visa through the consulate. I told her I hadn't been aware I needed to apply that way, but had no problems doing it. Then she said something strange. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not in trouble. You're not a criminal. I remember thinking, why would she say that? Of course I'm not a criminal. She then told me they had to send me back to Canada. That didn't concern me. I assumed I would simply book a flight home, but as I sat searching for flights, a man approached me. Come with me, he said. There was no explanation, no warning. He led me to a room, took my belongings from my hand, and ordered me to put my hands against the wall. A woman immediately began patting me down. The commands came rapid fire after another, too fast to process. They took my shoes and pulled out my shoelaces. What are you doing? What is happening? I asked. You are being detained. I don't understand. What does that mean? For how long? I don't know. This would be the response to nearly every question I would ask over the next 2 weeks. I don't know. They brought me downstairs for a series of interviews and medical questions, searched my bags, and told me I had to get rid of half my belongings because I couldn't take everything with me. Take everything with me where? A woman asked me for the name of someone they could contact on my behalf, and then she realized that she didn't have some phone, so she got her best friend's number, Britt's number, and then they gave them her phone number, and then they handed her a mat and a folded up sheet. So she went through this whole terror, and it goes on much more. There's a whole line of what she went through, but it's like this whole nightmare that she went through that takes up like a big portion of Facebook. But yeah, this is a real thing that you are talking about, because this is definitely something that happened to the American Pie actress and everything. And then
there are so many people crying out. Where did all the women go? Why are they can't even relocate them? A lot of the men, you can eventually get a hold of them in Mexico or wherever they went. Because I'm actually talking with a guy who got deported to Mexico, and he's there. He's there now. Nothing. He has nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he's just thanking God he's still alive. But
and that's what this woman was saying
but,
too.
But here's the thing: they did have some women. They didn't know what to do with them, and so they threw them in that container down there with 1,000 men in Florida. And then they pulled them out because that got a lot of attention. And I think those are lawsuits. But Nick, this is getting disgusting. But where are the women? That's what we need.
That's the young lady that was detained and everything like that. That's Jasmine Mooney. Yeah. And the last thing she says is, "This is not just my story. It is the story of thousands of people still trapped in a system that profits from their suffering. I'm writing in the hope that someone out there, someone with the power to change any of this, will do that," and everything. So she's basically calling on folks like us.
The media isn't covering all the women that are missing.
And that's even what she said. She said
the media is not covering it. I'm hearing it.
We will have to dig into this one because it's pretty important. Like I said, that.
Well, and the children, they have been picking up children. Yeah. And they're deporting children with nowhere to go.
I did see some of that, and I'm wondering, and there's some serious legal issues on that whole issue. And then there was one incredibly stupid comment on the internet. Well, if they came here and they came here without due process, then they can leave without due process. In other words,
that was your buddy Dan. What's his name that came on our show?
But wait a minute. If you break the law, if they break the law getting in here, it does not give the U.S. government the right to break the law. I'm sorry, that doesn't work that way.
But we don't send it back.
There is no excuse for the United States government to break their own laws. I'm sorry. So we're going to see a lot of proliferation of lawsuits, assuming they can actually get their day in court here. Because remember, once they get deported and they're stuck in a prison somewhere in El Salvador, the court seems to be not available anytime soon. However, for those U.S. citizens, they're going to be back here. I don't care what.
I think Trump made a deal with El Salvador. He gets paid for every slave. But he shouldn't be sending people over without due process. And, here's my other question. He campaigned on Laken Riley's blood, literally campaigned on her blood. And we got to send the violent criminals. And I'm going to make sure. Do you know the man that killed Laken Riley is never going to go to El Salvador? He cannot be detained by ICE until his prison term's up. And guess what? That's life.
Yeah.
So he's not deporting all of the violent criminals. But that should have been the first man. That should have been the first man on the plane to El Salvador.
Yeah. What he is doing is creating a chilling effect of anybody wanting to go visit the U.S. They say that the tourism is down. Remember
Vegas is closing.
the
Vegas closed. Vegas started firing all their concierge.
Yeah, the number one travel place in the world is France. Number two is Spain, and the United States was like number three, but they're
Vegas
dropping.
was in the top. But Nevada senators and everything have been crying out. But literally, Vegas, from what I heard, and I'm going to dig, everything but the Bellagio has started closing down.
Really, they started laying off some people because of the lack of.
Everybody is getting.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, U.S. corporations aren't stupid. They do see the handwriting on the wall, and that there's going to be a slowdown in tourism, and it's going to hurt also the airline industry because people just aren't going to fly. But the airline industry will probably do rerouting into other countries. Level, which is a big, it's big owned by Iberian Airways, I believe British Airways. It's headquartered in Barcelona, and they do fly to the United States, but they also fly nonstop to Buenos Aires and I believe Sao Paulo, Santiago, Chile. They go to Latin America as well. But I think we're going to see as a diversion of tourists. Now in Spain, what they did, because they had too many tourists, they thought, they took water pistols, believe it or not, if you go to the tourist areas, and they shoot the tourists with water pistols. It's kind of stupid. Right. Let me tell you, I'd rather be shot with a water pistol than deported.
Yeah, me too. And you know what? We're at the top of the hour, and I have to go.
Timeshare show coming up now.
Yeah, can you take care of this? I need to go to see Irene.
Yeah, we're gonna go. Okay, yeah, go see the timeshare people. We'll see you next time on this media show. Let me go find our exit here. Where is it? It's right here. Goodbye.